everyone. Thank you so much for joining in and staying on until 3:30 today. We are so glad to have you here as speakers, as panelists, as viewers on YouTube. And we are so glad to be able to have this conversation and this conference talking about youth mental health and how we can increase resilience in the students today. Just before I begin, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Tanmay Khambete. I am the psychological counselor here at SKU, and it's been a wonderful experience here. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our panelists and also thank them for coming, taking time out from their very busy schedules of college classes, work, assignments, and volunteering to participate and share their insights. I'd like to first introduce Shagufta Sieda. So she's a fourth-year student pursuing an integrated bachelor's degree in law and arts from Symbiosis Law School, Pune. So she's our very own SIU person. She's a strong advocate of human rights and inclusive development in the society. She's worked with various NGOs that promote community development, inclusivity, and mental health, like the Federation of Women Lawyers Kenya, UNFPA Kenya, and Physicians for Human Rights USA. So she has a varied background and experience with international human rights as well. And she's been able to identify and understand the relationship, the very symbiotic relationship between the community development and mental emotional well-being. She's currently the president of the Rotaract Club of Symbiosis Law School, Pune, and she's the advisor to the International Cell and a member of Student Welfare Committee of SLS Pune. So she's also in a lot of various leadership roles and has been able to work with the youth and in the community as a leader. So she's had, like I said, multiple positions of leadership and responsibility, and she recognizes that emotional well-being is at the core of any student's development, and it determines their contributions to the development of the communities and eventually the society. Welcome, Shagufta. We then have Arya Bhattacharya, who is a final year student of computer science at BITS Pilani in the Pilani campus. And since his early adolescence, Arya has faced several mental health issues which were finally diagnosed at his last final year of college. Seeing the lack of awareness about mental health issues and a host of difficulties that survivors experience post their diagnosis, he started volunteering with Empower on campus. So he's our Empower representative. He's a trained youth mental health first aider. Post his graduation, he aims to use technology to build innovative and futuristic solutions that would help patients cope with mental health issues in easier ways. And this is a very interesting topic as well, Arya, because we as young people, as young adults, and future adults will now or have now started to use technology at an increasing rate as compared to our parents. And so integrating technology with mental health is definitely the future of accessibility in mental health. And we'll get to that as we go ahead with our discussion. So thank you, Arya, for joining in as well. We also have Aditi Mishra. So she is currently pursuing her BSc Economics from Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics in Pune. So she is an economics learning student, and she recognizes that the COVID-19 pandemic has left scars on almost all countries' economic, right? And so building economic resilience has become a global challenge. And this not only permeates to resilience on the part of people, but also those who create these policies and make these policies and the general public as well. And so the youth of today who are going to become future citizens must inculcate this vital attribute of resilience, right? So it may be physical, emotional, or mental resilience, as Dr. Neerja Birla was talking about. And so this is one of the primary reasons that she decided she wanted to be on the panel to talk about the economic side of mental health and how various policies also can play a role in increasing resilience. So thank you, Ayati, for joining. Um, we have Anjor Gadkari. So she is a counseling psychologist from Nagpur. She graduated from SSLA, that's the Symbiosis School of Liberal Arts, majoring in psychology with a minor in peace and conflict studies. During this time, she also advanced her peace and conflict studies education through her semester at Leibniz University in Hanover. She's completed her MSc in psychological counseling from the Indian Institute of Psychology and Research in Bengaluru. She worked as a psychologist briefly at Srujan Psychotherapy and Counseling Center in Nagpur. And currently, she is studying at Queen Mary University in London, and she's pursuing her MSc Mental Health, Cultural and Global Perspectives in Mental Health Care. So she then brings into the panel a socio-cultural factor and how all of that influences mental health and how we can improve mental health services to reflect diversity, social justice, and address health inequalities. And that's going to be also a very interesting perspective to have for the policy that we will go ahead and want to develop. So thank you, Anjor, for joining in. Last but not the least, we have Ms. Himani Verma. She's a clinical psychology postgrad student at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. She has completed her undergrad from Delhi University in 2017. After that, she worked as a full time teacher at an all girls Delhi government school in East Delhi under her fellowship for Teach for India. Himani has also worked with the Delhi Commission of Protection of Children Rights, the State Council of Education Research and Training in Delhi. Her research interests are within the area of community mental health policy, and building a resilient education system to foster growth and development in students. And we genuinely have a extremely varied and wonderful panelist, with us today, who come from very different backgrounds with very rich experiences in from the micro to the macro. Um, and then going ahead to talking about what the panel for us today is, since we are going to be talking about students and the youth mental health and increasing resilience, our panel will focus on the various challenges that this age group faces, right? The young adults face, how that impacts their mental health, and what supports would help with improving their mental health, right, at their own campuses. What can they do to empower themselves? It could be peer support groups or peer mentor groups. What can students in leadership positions as well bring in their campuses, these various resources? And then we'll also touch upon the various challenges, particularly faced by minority groups who are in higher education systems, those who are differently abled or international students, and learn a little bit about their perspective on how their mental health is affected with the different kind of challenges that they face as compared to able-bodied students. Really going ahead from that topic, right, Himani? So you have a really vast experience talking working with students who come from a minority section with your Teach for India fellowship and internship. So can you talk to us a little bit about how was that experience for you? What were the challenges that you saw these students faced, who, especially those who come from a lower socioeconomic background, or the non-English speaking students, and what was it that they faced as they went through school?
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And it's indeed a very important question also that you ask. So I'm going to shift my lens first from a teacher's lens to a student's lens. And I'm currently a student right now, and who self-identify myself with a caste and a class which is marginalized. So
Mhm.
that lens will be shifted from a teacher to a student. So while I was working in an all-girls classroom, couple of things that I observed within my girls and want to be really mindful and respectful of their experience. They come from a lot of trauma from communities that have faced a lot of violence and in and out violence, domestic violence, and a lot of these, intergenerational trauma also. They come from these kind of experiences. And when we used to sit together in class, and I remember one of the component of my teaching was to have morning meetings and do mindfulness practice with them. It was particularly difficult for those girls, and it was because and I used to ask them, and what happened? They're like, Didi, we don't want to do mindfulness, we don't want to do breathing. Can you do something else with us? Because in that moment, I asked them to close their eyes and think about their happy place. And that is when I realized, okay, am I, what are the kind of instructions am I giving to them? So we used to do a lot of artwork. So we used to engage in art together, and that is when I realized that the kind of experiences they come with, and how I, as a teacher, have to be mindful of that in any instructions that I give to my students, or any kind of modality I bring into the classroom. So that, having said that, one, now as a student, in a university, what I see, some of the challenges I have seen over the past 1 year. Uh, like I just want to give this a disclaimer. It may include certain personal experiences, and I would again want to be respectful of those students who have gone through it. There, I have seen a couple of students in my personal journey committing suicide, and there are a lot of helpline numbers. Just want to give a disclaimer. I may talk about something which can be triggering, and just want to put it there. There are a lot of resources that you can access, like certain psychosocial helpline, like Kiran and other iCall and all. But I have personally come across students who have committed suicide during this pandemic and during this lockdown, and we are, and that is when I thought and reflected on this question, and I'm going to come from a very personal reflection. When we design these classes and when we design these instructions, we never thought of what will a child who don't have access to the resources will go through, because for an for education also comes with an environment. What kind of environment are you in? Do you have Are you watching constant violence, constant abuse happening around you, in and out, while you are attending a class? These kind of experience, I have seen my own friends going through, and couple of them have to drop out of the college.
She does bring up a very important point about not having enough resources, not um, like having this lack of resource, having these various obstacles that essentially play a role when we talk about the pandemic, right? And one of the later points also, we and possibly she touched upon, that is the transition from face to face learning to online learning.
So I was talking about like the inequity in terms of the resources and the design of the classes, and a lot of students were not able to attend it. And I understand, and I understand that social capital can play a lot of role in bringing stress, anxiety, helplessness, that hopelessness those my own friends faced during this pandemic time. And it impacted a lot of them to drop out of the college. They were like, no, we can't continue like this, we need to be in the classroom or in a college to study. And these kind of experiences makes you as a person reflect, uh, what kind of equal like system are we creating, or we creating what kind of resources are we creating for students to be able to access at least basic right like education. And during the pandemic, it has been one of the major stressor, not being able to attend classes the way that have that academic experience. And this is something I also observed, not in this like in this kind of picture, but while I was in my while I was teaching my girls, and while I was in the school, um, there has been a lot of inferiority complex that I used to see. The lot of labeling, self labeling, self esteem issues within my girls. And there was a lot of learned helplessness. There's a concept. They're like, Didi, I used to ask them, what are your aspirations? What do you want to be in life? And then you used to say, Didi, I can't, I don't know, pata nahi kya banogi. And we need to be also be mindful that this is an all girls classroom, and gender plays a very important role in that system. So these have been couple of my experiences in terms of being a student during a COVID, and watching my friends undergo this kind of challenge, and being a teacher. And at present, I was in a connection with couple of my students, and them undergoing the similar kind of adversity, and a lot of, yeah. So it's very heartbreaking for me, um, as well as a as a student, and as someone who has been a teacher to them.
Right.
um,
So there's a lot of helplessness, anxiety that comes with
yes.
not having enough, let's say, resources because you belong to a certain social status, or a certain caste system, and that can be really quite debilitating, as you said. And that gender plays a big role
Big role.
in also the kind of opportunities that girls versus boys get, and we see that also quite a lot. And that actually kind of brings me to Arya. Like, I Can you talk a little bit about how that experience was for you, and how your experience or your college life essentially, as a student, have you been able to experience, or see your classmates experience these challenges on, with respect to, like, it could be academics, or it could be relationships, or it could be really even just the transition from online to offline, or
Hi.
offline to
So
online.
the thing is that most of my classmates were actually not on the receiving side of a mental illness, so that is very fortunate. But quite a few people who I interacted with while I was a part of Empower were very disturbed, to say the least. And the thing was that in bits there is quite some pressure, like academic pressure, and also placements are a big deal. So once those things start taking a lot of your time, then the other issues crop up, and then there's I mean, I don't think the right term is comorbidity, but it's like a lot of other issues keep working together, and then people are not in the right mind to take decisions or also concentrate on what they're doing. So it's sort of a vicious cycle, and at the same time it's also it's counterintuitive, because somewhere people think that the more effort they put in, the more thinking they put into their to the activity that they are doing, the more successful they will be. But eventually what happens is the health degrades over time, and then they lose out on their academics, which means that either they lose out on their grades, or in terms of placements they probably fall short of certain companies in terms of their tests or their cutoffs. So that again stirs up the cycle once again, and then it's a repeated cycle which keeps going on, and it's very difficult for students to come out of that cycle and have a new effort, so that they kind of overdo like they kind of undo the harm that was done in some sense and make progress. But that is very difficult, and when you're in a remote town like Pilani, there are no resources outside the campus. So most of the earlier Empire was established was probably by September of 2019. So before that, Empire was not there on campus. So students used to face a lot of issues which they were not able to confront with the help of trained counselors. And because it's very remote and the nearest city is 200 kilometers Delhi, so it's very difficult to even bring counselors for a weekly visit, or probably 2 days or 3 days in a week. So in that sense, there was a lack of resources, but thankfully right now Empire has taken up. So there's a lot of improvement going on, and the resident psychologist does a pretty good job over there. So people are giving positive feedback, so that's a good thing. Yeah.
Right. So then, in terms of the challenges that you saw your classmates, or even yourself go through, before you had a counselor, let's say, on board, and even during the peak pandemic COVID-19 period, what would you say, essentially, the challenges that kind of kept cropping up, for yourself and for others?
I think given the huge academic stress and the constant deadlines that keep popping up,
Mm,
and of course the surprise tests and the attending classes, so the
mm,
main challenge was to probably focus on the coursework that's going on. And what I've heard from most people, I don't have concrete data on this, but most people say that as far as the academic coursework of BITS and IITs are concerned, so they do not provide straightforward questions. So as far as going to classes is concerned, you might as well go to all classes, but your paper might be blank when the end semester approaches. So the thing is that there's a lot of application based knowledge required for the questions that they ask. And in case you have a mental health disorder, then your cognitive capability goes to a toss. So because of that, you're not able to think in different terms, and you kind of restricted in how you can make points, and that means that you lose out on the marks. And because it's relative grading, so your marks kind of lies on the bottom of the group, which makes a bad grade for you. And this is just one of the, like, this is probably the major issue. But also apart from that, people tend to have relationship issues, and people also have a
mm,
lot of clubs and activities and departments going on wherein they contribute in various different ways. But
mm,
because of their mental health or some of the issues that they face, they're not able to contribute effectively, which means their dismissal or their revoking in some sense. So that is also a huge issue over there.
Right, and like you mentioned, I think it's a cycle. So one thing affects the other, almost like a
Right.
domino
It's
effect,
very
and that.
difficult to get out of it. Yeah.
Right, right. Um, right. So I would really like at this point to ask Anjur about a little bit of her experience as a international student, right? The challenges that international students that she or her peers may have faced living in a new country, adapting over there, and then, bringing in this whole pandemic angle. If you could shed light a little bit on how that looks like for us, that would be really helpful.
Yeah. So I think that both what Himani and Arya said are important points for students everywhere, not just international students.
Mm,
But having studied here, I can definitely say that there are unique challenges that come with it. So, for example, the thing you talked about, having to adapt to
mm,
a new country, a new education system, adapting to a new culture entirely.
mm,
And that can also lead to culture shock for many students. I've seen that sort of it brings a lot of confusion, anxiety,
mm,
uncertainty about how to deal with the sudden change that you're faced with. And
mm,
it can take a lot of time to reach that kind of acceptance and find your balance between your home culture
mm,
and the culture in your host country. So it's
mm,
something students struggle with a lot. And
mm,
apart from that, when you move to a new country, your identity shifts a bit, or people's perception of you shifts a bit. So you're Indian, of course, but for many people here, you're going to be South Asian, you're going to be brown, you will be, unfortunately, sometimes an immigrant or an outsider. And that can lead to people treating you differently. There can be discrimination. There have been many incidents I know of where people have um, faced the use of racial slurs, things like that. It's difficult, and I think it can really take a hit on people's self confidence and self esteem when that happens to you. And also, when that happens, you're also socially excluded sometimes, and there will be some people who will actively try to form groups that are different and may not include you because you come from a certain background. And this is also very, very prevalent on campuses sometimes. So these things are very different. It's a massive shift to your social reality when you come here. And then when you add the prolonged stress people have been facing with this pandemic, I think it's been more than a year now. So this sort of chronic stress that students are facing, having to manage their education, shifting to Zoom despite being in a new country, you're essentially sitting in a room and studying online. It's difficult because they're not able to form relationships with their peers, have the sort of rapport with faculty that you're expected to over the course of your education. It can be really socially isolating sometimes. And at the end of the day, also, when students are facing all of this, I feel that unfortunately, many of them have lost family, lost friends, and to have faced that and to also be thinking about your education at this time, or to be shifting to another country even and having this sort of background, it's really, really difficult. I think it's amazing that students are still managing to do this right now.
Right, absolutely. And the point that you talked about, loneliness and exclusion, that's very much the case for any essentially Southeast Asian or Indian or um, Eastern, let's say, individual who travels abroad for studying. Like the color of your skin is like the first thing that on which you get unfortunately discriminated or essentially kept different from the group or the heteronormative group that's present. And then, as you mentioned, the prolonged stress with COVID and having to juggle and manage all of these things, that sort of points us back again to our previous session about resilience. Like, how can we then include resilience for this, be inclusive, and that sort of really brings me to Shagufta, because I know you've been in leadership positions, you have been a leader in the community regarding mental health. So a little bit, can you talk about inclusion, or how can we essentially build these communities, or be more inclusive in terms of human rights, right? Like human rights, mental health, and inclusion. How does that look like as a leader?
All right. A very good afternoon to one and all present here. I hope all of you are doing fine. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah.
we
All
can hear you
right.
loud and clear.
Great. So I would like to talk a little bit about mental health and a lot about human rights and inclusivity. So in many countries, people do not have access to basic mental health care and treatment that they essentially require. And according to WHO and according to me, and I'm sure a lot of you might agree, it is a fundamental right. It is something that's absolutely essential and as important as physical health. Human rights to mental health are universal standards that protect and promote not only healthcare but also well-being, mental health and well-being. And this is a part of a standard of living that unfortunately many countries do not guarantee, do not protect, do not promote. And the stigma and discrimination associated with mental and psychosocial disabilities often marginalize people from their community, from the society, and thereby it affects their ability to be able to educate themselves, to secure employment, just have a very basic, very fulfilling livelihood, and they fail to exercise their civil and political rights. They fail to exercise their cultural rights, and the absence of community-based mental health care is the cause for this. It is essentially so important, and it is something that's not guaranteed by so many communities, so many stakeholders, and it's important for us to include all stakeholders in the process of securing, promoting, and protecting mental health care. So, and of course, specific rights of persons with mental disabilities are violated. For example, women who have certain mental health issues, or persons with physical disabilities. So this adds on to that. And then there's the pandemic. There are other problems in the society that affect them, and eventually rehabilitation facilities and facilities provided by the state are inadequate or insufficient as a result of that. So I think that really needs to be taken care of. And I would really like to stress on the point of intersectionality, which is something, mental health is actually at the core of that. Because so many people face issues in terms of mental health from different spectrums, of course, and different backgrounds. So intersectionality is the solution, in my opinion, at least, to this particular aspect of mental health and human rights.
Absolutely. And it's like you very correctly said, it's so important for the community to have these resources in place and have these foundational pieces in place. And we'll talk a little bit in detail, possibly in the later half of the session. But like, we've all talked about all of these mental health challenges that currently the youth is facing. We've talked both about how COVID has essentially made things worse, how lack of resources has not allowed them to let's say flourish, right? Or how their own caste location, let's say marginalization, has made things worse for them. But can we talk maybe a little bit about how things were different pre and post the pandemic, or pre-pandemic and during pandemic? Because we've all seen research, we've all also on some level experienced that during the pandemic, and as all panelists before our session have been talking about, that the pandemic definitely has had some effect on all of our mental health. It's increased mental health issues, or it's exacerbated underlying mental health issues. And I'd like to ask Ayati at this point, because we've not really had her in the first question really. But can you talk to us a little bit about how, let's say, your own experiences regarding your life, education, relationships, academics, mental health issues? How was that during, pre-COVID, during COVID, and in this period right now?
A very good afternoon to everyone. Am I audible? Yeah, okay. So to answer that question, I would like to narrate my personal experience. So I took my last ISC board exam on the 11th of March 2020. And essentially after that, there's that excitement of having crossed that landmark in your life. So I was happy. And then on the 24th of March, I remember the nationwide lockdown in India was announced. So honestly, for the first 2 months, it really didn't make much of a difference to me, because I was still in that mode of enjoying having completed my board exams, and I was at home, doing my work, binge watching, indulging in things that I really like to do. But I tell you, like around, so from March to May, it really didn't make a lot of difference. So I knew that there's this deadly virus, and to contain that, we have to stay at home. But from around mid May, I guess, I felt like something is missing. I was not able to talk to people. There was literally no social contact with people. I was not even able to go out on a stroll or, meet my friends. And generally by May, the board results are out and the college admissions start. But in our case, what had happened was that till July, August, there was no sign of any college entrance tests or, you know, even college admissions or whatsoever. Even the board results were not out. So that was a time when I think it really did impact me in a way that I really didn't know what was about to happen next. There was no sign. So initially, I had this thought in mind that, okay, the situation would get better. But on the contrary, every day the situation worsened at that time. And I really didn't know what was about to happen to our college examinations, we going to college, etc. So that was a time when I really, experienced stress and anxiety and a sense of uncertainty. So in July, then our board results were out, July or August. And then in September, I took my entrance tests for the Gokhale Institute, and I began with my first semester there. So the entire first semester was online. It was all the lectures as well as the examinations were online. And then we had some hopes from the second semester, but even that unfortunately was entirely online. And I'm almost on the verge of completing my second semester, and still I haven't been to my college. So I have completed 1 year of my undergraduation at the Gokhale Institute, but I've not been to college. And people know the situation in Pune, so I really don't know when I would be able to actually take my offline classes. So, so the entire schedule right now is like just getting up in the morning, gazing at your laptop screen the entire day, and then just the schedule continues. It really is stressful at times. I must tell you, there are some people, some friends of mine who say that they do not find motivation in attending online classes. So since the past 1 year, we've been attending online classes. So of course, there comes a time when you are like done with it. So they don't even feel like attending. And it happens to me as well. You sometimes feel a lot of a kind of demotivation, and you don't want to attend classes. So I think it really does have an adverse impact on mental health of people of our age in general. So and college is not only about attending classes. If I would have gone to college, I would have had the opportunity of meeting my professors. My batchmates have not even seen I have not even seen them. They haven't seen me except on some Zoom calls or Google Meets. And it's about enhancing my social network, but I'm not able to do anything because of the current restraints, because of COVID. And I really don't know what next would happen. So this feeling of uncertainty and stress and anxiety, it I think it really does adversely impact mental health. And I'm not just talking on my behalf. I think a lot of people I've heard from, they say that they do not find motivation anymore. Like for the past 1 year, they have been attending online classes and they're not able to even find any kind of encouragement to do that anymore. So it really does have an impact. Yeah, thanks.
Right. And it's like the whole excitement of starting like college life, like meeting your peers, like possibly also hanging out, bunking classes, all of that's like completely out the window. There's no real college
Absolutely.
feel.
I had the excitement of attending college initially, but really right now I don't have any more. Like,
Right, absolutely. And for your first college experience to be something that's so disconnected and so disjointed, for sure, and that whole thing you said about uncertainty, that's so true. Like, you have no idea when finally things would open up for you to come back to college and experience that college life. And that's certainly very, very disorienting and disturbing. I do want to ask Arya though, and the other panelists. Now, you guys have experienced both. Like, you guys have experienced college life in person, and now you're taking classes online. I want to ask Arya how, let's say, that experience has been for you to attend college in person, being on campus, seeing your friends, but now having to do all of that online.
So as far as attending college on campus is concerned, it was definitely a different experience, especially because campuses tend to be pretty big. So you are able to roam around and do a lot of things. And as far as our campus is concerned, it's there's nothing outside, so everything is concentrated within the campus. But yes, our campus is pretty well maintained, so we had a lot of opportunities to excel in whatever we like to, not just sports but also other clubs and activities, dramas, theater, whatever it is. But of course, once you come back to home, then you're not allowed to do that because you can't get out of your homes. And the thing is that going to the classes and also a change of environment was a very different experience rather than sitting in front of a computer the entire time, as Ayati mentioned. And there's a specific stress, I believe, which comes from looking at the video every day. But but I would say, like, for the newcomers, that it was, if you have mental health issues and you don't have appropriate counseling services on campus, then it's not a cure all per se, because a lot of your peers won't understand your issues. So that was the case with me most of the times when Empower was not on campus, wherein a lot of my friends didn't understand the issues, and I was also not able to undertake in a lot of activities because my mental health prohibited me from doing that. So but yeah, like I did get better, but unfortunately that coincided with the incoming of the pandemic. So after that, it's been more or less like the normal student stuff, wherein I kind of get bored with the online classes, but there's no other way out, so to say. So
Right, absolutely. And even being on campus, like going to classes, like you said, change of environment, that brings a little bit of motivation. But now, like Aiti said, like that whole part of just attending classes online, that definitely brings in a lot of fatigue. And there's this term called Zoom fatigue that we've all been facing because everything's online.
right.
It's just
And
so draining.
even research which was like done in labs, like people used to collect in groups and work together to solve problems, that had a special energy within that lab. But now it's everything's online and at your home, and everything's on AWS or cloud, so that doesn't give that the same kind of feeling anymore. So
Absolutely, 100%. Um, so, and all of this, we are saying that we are in our home country, right? We may be in a different city, but we're at least in India. But Anjur, what happens to then those students? And you did talk about that a little with the prolonged stress, but what happens to the mental health of students who are living abroad and who are facing all of this Zoom fatigue? What, in your experience, has been the varied effects of this transition to online education?
I think definitely it's been difficult, and I speak for, I guess, all students again, and not just international students in saying this. But definitely, when you face Zoom fatigue, I think that automatically it affects your attention, your concentration, and ultimately, I think what is happening, like which is something I've spoken to some of my peers as well, is we really feel that our education is affected because it's it's not going to be the same as being in a classroom. It's not going to be the same, as Arya said, like having groups where you do problem solving exercises, where you have uh, intensive discussions about topics. So I think the quality of education has unfortunately changed a bit. I wouldn't say it's bad, or it's completely like unacceptable to study online, but it's definitely changed, and it's taken time for everyone to adjust to it. And it's just when I think this happens, it's really frustrating because you come all the way to another country with a certain expectation that you will get education that is quite different, and then that leads to disappointment because that's just not been the case this time. But I think it's just, for us, it's been about trying to find the best resources we have. So just making use of everything else. So, okay, we can't attend classes in person, but what else can we do? So, if rules allow, we try to sit outside in groups. Like I think groups of 6 are allowed now. So people try to make study groups. People try to use the library. Just anything that can enhance your experience at this time, I think, is what people have been doing to help themselves.
Right. So it's also about like being scrappy and finding the resources, or being really innovative and thinking out of the box. And again, that goes back to the resilience piece that we talked about in the previous session, that what can you do to, so this is the reality, this is the situation, what can you do to find your way out of it, how can you make the best of what's unfortunately there in front of you. But for sure, like that does, like everyone was saying, that leads to a lot of demotivation. There is a lot of Zoom fatigue, which then again causes that whole domino effect of not wanting to do anything, not wanting to um, be in that situation, and then wanting to just, not engage in anything at all. Which then also brings me to think of social support as a topic, right? What So if I were to ask this question, what is the role of, let's say, social supports here in in being in this environment, or this transition to online learning education, or even with your own mental health, right? um, Himani, do you have any thoughts on that? What do you think social support, how does social support play a role?
Sure. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. So as Anjur shared, and it's not just the experience of international students, but students everywhere. This
Mm,
social exclusion and this, not being excluded or being in isolation.
mm,
What I experienced personally also was that when I was in college versus now when I am in an online medium, when we were in college, we used to have a lot of peer groups where we identify ourselves with the people who have shared experience. We come from shared live experience, and now it's all like that group that we have, that peer support that we have within the college, was very fundamental and very important for us to hold on to. And even during this in and out academic stress, other stress in our life, this was the group that we fall back upon. Now since the transition has happened online, what like the a lot of us are facing this, isolation, in the sense that those people that we identified with, those people that we have shared experience with, those people that we co-learn, and sit together and help each other with assignment. And I want to bring this one incident. There is this boy in my class who comes from a village and didn't have access to English as a language. And since all our instructions were in English, for him it was very difficult to do assignments. And we had this peer group, and I used to sit with him and be like, hey, let's work on it together. I'll help you whatever you can't understand. We may help each other. Now that has been taken away from us. That security, that safety blanket we had back in college, it's like completely in isolation. And just going forward with this, it's really difficult for students also at this time. And a lot of time, I'm currently reading this book by Ajanta Subramaniam. And there was this point she brought up, that a lot of times students may have the skills to do certain things, but it's just that they don't have the language to do it. So, and that kind of experiences create a lot of anxiety and isolation and helplessness in a lot of my peers as such. And support is really important, that that blanket has been somewhere taken away with this COVID situation.
absolutely. And that kind of also loops back to our previous point of having these social supports, having this peer group in place, right? Which then also, brings me to this curious thought that's in my head about, Arya, you have very, very honestly and openly talked about your mental health struggles when you were in college. And whether, this is during COVID or pre-COVID, what would you have wanted, let's say, as a student, to feel supported in your college? What would you have needed, let's say, as a resource, or as a um, as what students can do in the university setting to, like Himani said, have that net, have that safety blanket?
So the before Empire came to the campus, we did, like the thing is that most people are very skeptical about mental health issues and they don't want to talk about it. So like there's definitely this loss that people don't understand you, but there's also greater loss that you're not able to find like-minded individuals in the process
Hmm.
and create a support group of sorts for yourself. wherein you can interact with people and have a, a blanket as you put forth.
Hmm.
So I would have definitely, I mean, the plan was to make a support group. In fact, we had made it, but then
Hmm.
COVID started and that kind of got disbanded. But
Hmm.
ideally, if during my initial years in college, if
Hmm.
such a support group or a mental health action team or whatever you like to call it would have been in place, that would be really helpful. The second thing is that physical health receives a lot of importance, but at the same time mental health does not receive the same kind of importance. So when I had anxiety issues, I used to have panic attacks during the afternoons, and during that time I had a lot of lectures during the afternoons itself. So from my hostel to the lecture theaters, it was quite some distance. But unfortunately, during a panic attack, or even when there's a so during a panic attack, you can't really move or don't have the right frame of mind to do that, and there are chances you might fall down on the street itself. So it was a very dangerous proposition. So I ended up missing classes. So eventually, I during my third or fourth year, the college administration introduced on the recordings of classes, which was a very welcome move by not just like people who needed them, but also people for revision and other purposes as well. So that is also how like technology is coming into play, and like how people are using it for benefit. And physical health is a big aspect in life. Like hostels, if you have a test, then if you tell your hostel superintendent that you have a an upset stomach or you have a headache and you're not able to give the test, then they usually write a note which exempts you from the test and you're allowed to give a makeup. But in case you have a panic attack, you don't have the right to request for such a makeup. And in that sense, your academic performance does get affected really in a very bad way. So I would have definitely preferred that such things are taken into consideration. And definitely a lot of teachers and students are not aware about the genuineness of mental health issues, which is a really concerning thing, because it's put forth as some sort of a weakness of the mind, or it's some sort of a act or drama by the student just to get rid of the work that they have been assigned, which is not the case. And there have been some very peculiar suggestions that people give, which is like, okay, you're feeling sad, so don't feel sad, or start being happy, or start watching TV, which many a times does not work, and it kind of makes things even worse. So a supportive environment definitely, and a supportive faculty system wherein because of your lack of cognitive different design in the syllabus, which probably allows you more time to investigate a topic rather than breeze past like the other normal students, and have a support system emotionally as well as academically, wherein counselors are not just third party people who are counseling these patients or students, but they also have some sort of input in the academic system as well, so that tailor-made systems can be designed for such students for education. So
Right, absolutely. So again, going back to Shagufta's point of having that community support, right? So it's not the student as an individual person or an isolation. It's about all of these important stakeholders like your faculty, your peers, your parents, everyone kind of coming together and working for each other rather than having like singular individual systems in place that essentially cater only to a specific category of people and then disregard everyone else. So what I'm then also hearing from you, Arya, is that um, it's somebody in a leadership position to kind of increase awareness, increase accessibility, having these resources, right? So then if I'm correct in summarizing, then it would say that that is the role of a leader, let's say, in the society, when they're building resilience, to be able to provide these spaces where awareness is included or it is generated, and everyone feels safe in each other's company. And as Himani said, like having that blanket, right, having that safety blanket of knowing that you are not alone in this journey, that there's somebody else that who's possibly going through the same more or less thing, which then also then sort of brings me to this end section of the session, um, talking about having these stakeholders as a part of building resilience in the youth, right? Because we said that we know that a person is doesn't function in isolation, and it's important for everyone to join hands. um, can we talk like a little bit about the current, let's say, resources that are needed, right? So, student resources as well as resources in the higher education society, and what may be specific guidelines and committees that could be made? Because Himani, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that TIS has a very broad social justice network, and they are very much focused on increasing awareness and destigmatization. So, can you talk a little bit on how to incorporate that angle into higher education institutes?
Sure, sure. Thank you so much for asking that. I think I'm lucky to be a part of an institute that is very socially conscious, and that is the kind of attitude we also, impart in the students. And I'm lucky to be the part of the peer group that is very, mindful of the locations from where we come and affirm to our locations and our identity. Some a couple of things that has helped me as a student in this has been, we have a very robust peer support group which is run by the counseling unit, and our counselors do practice from a narrative lens. They have that narrative approach to affirm person's location, and give the feedback to the faculty as well as to this child is facing these kind of problem, and I guess faculty is very accommodative of that as well in terms of, and has been very supportive during the pandemic in itself. Having said this, counseling support, a very robust counseling network, a very robust peer support group run by the students who come from shared experience, shared and affirming locations from where we come. A couple of more things that are there is that we have a lot of conversation, and I've seen it as a student, in not just coming from the faculty side but from every a system within our institute, uh, that has normalized mental health for us. Like, we have in and out conversations about being like, it's okay to talk, it's okay to seek help. There is a unit, go seek help. Even during my classes during COVID, my professors used to be like, it's okay children, we can understand you guys might be feeling a lot of fatigue. It's okay to tell openly to the class and share. I think that normalizing conversation and like that kind of destigmatize mental illnesses or seeking a mental health support in general. So that has been my experience in this in general, and yeah, that has been really helpful for me as a student, and have for a couple of more as well. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you're coming here as a like a graduate student, right? But I'd like to ask Ayati, who's just starting out fresh. She's in her first year. She's not even been to college. But Ayati, if I were to ask you, let's say based on all of our discussions and insights that we've gotten, in terms of, let's say, if you had to build resilience for yourself, moving ahead in your coursework, what do you think the role of the individual family systems, all of these other different people that are a part of your community, policies for that matter, what do you think is then the role of all of these systems to build resilience in, let's say, youth? Because you are in that 18 to 25 age group, you're on the lower rung of it. So I'd like to ask you how that would then look for you.
Yeah. So to put things in perspective, resilience basically means to, bounce back from all the difficulties and challenges that a person has faced, and then to move ahead. And resilience is a very central concept within this entire mental health framework, and that is the exact reason why we need to talk about it. So the role of the individual would be that, I think, first, I really believe this, that it has to come from within. People can help you, but ultimately you need to want that to happen in order for it to happen. So it has to come from within. And I think some of the ways in which an individual can ensure resilience in himself or herself is to first find a sense of purpose in life, because that is very, very important. And secondly, I think practicing mindfulness, which I have been doing during the COVID time, when I said that I
Okay, so essentially, what I'm then also hearing is that being essentially resilient and relying on your own inner strengths to build the resilience, and then we shall possibly talk about the role of the community. But I also want to kind of bring it to a more ground level, like grassroots level. So we talk about, okay, including all of these in higher education institutes. We talk about community mental health, wonderful acts and policies, and Shagufta mentioned that there are all of these rules in place, there are these human rights perspective of mental health, but it seems very disconnected and distant to the layman, right? It seems very out of reach for every one of us who would like to access or who would like to use their rights, or to essentially um, follow their civil rights. So Shagufta, can you talk about how we can possibly bridge this gap, right, between the law that's possibly there in the Mental Health Care Act and the public when it comes to mental health care issues, and providing these supports and providing, making it more accessible, let's say.
Right. So, in my opinion, I feel resilience, of course, is at the core, as IT rightly said. And here, I think youth leaders play a very important role. I think they're literally the ones who can bridge the gap between the law and what exists in reality, right? And we see how resilience is something that people are not usually born with. You're not born with this. This is not something that comes naturally to you. You can also, build on it. You can learn it as a skill. So these leaders, these youth leaders, community leaders, actually help you in understanding the importance of resilience, in understanding how you can actually make use of the resources that are available to you, or find alternatives to the resources that are not available. And if we take the example of India, and you look at the laws that exist here, they're very technical. It lacks human touch, right? And it does not really, it talks about involving the community, it talks about involving people from different backgrounds, but does it actually work in reality? Is it being implemented? What kind of enforcement mechanisms exist? So this has always been a question mark, not only in India but also abroad. And there are so many mental illnesses that exist, but in the act itself, Mental Health Care Act, they talk a lot about the clinical side of it. They don't really talk about therapy, or they don't really talk about counselors, psychosocial counselors, or they don't focus on emotional well-being, prevention, and promotion of mental well-being. And I think that's really important. And you don't necessarily need extremely qualified professionals, medical professionals, or clinical professionals for this. You can have people from a social background, from different backgrounds, actually, to deal with different kinds of problems that so many people today are facing. And I feel the government can do so much more in terms of community-based assisted living, right? And people with psychosocial or intellectual disabilities, for them to be able to live independently, and for them to be able to just depend on themselves, rely on themselves, feel confident in who they are, and just believe in themselves. I think that is something not that the government alone cannot do. You need to involve parents, you need to involve probably family members, students, and this has to start at a very early stage. So higher education institutions are not the only ones who are responsible for this, right? So schools, kindergarten, all of these institutions have to be trained. The personnel, they have to be trained to understand that each child has a very specific requirement, right? Not everyone is the same. And that continues, that has to continue, there has to be a flow. And it cannot stop with education, right? It also has to continue to job spaces, and probably retirement homes or other such institutes where people normally seek refuge. And we have we of course need a rights-based mental health mechanism. We need to involve the disabled, vulnerable, and disadvantaged. Just normalize human experiences, as Himani rightly pointed out, for that, so that we can have a more tolerant, more peaceful, and just society. And it's so important to sort of create these mechanisms to assess and improve human rights conditions for these people, right? And we do not have such mechanisms. Even if we do, they're very limited in terms of the resources that they have. And a lot of times NGOs, who are the main stakeholders, their opinions are not taken into consideration. And not only that, I think advocacy and awareness plays a very important role here, which is something I feel in India is it does not exist. I can say, advocacy for this really at the grassroots level. In especially Symbiosis is doing a great job when it comes to this. But there are so many other colleges and so many other people who do not have access to these resources, who are not given the right kind of education, or who are not aware about these things. So I think advocacy initiatives really need to come into the picture.
Absolutely, and such beautiful points, like making it accessible, making it sensitive to the differently abled, to the physically disabled, and all sections of society, not just like the privileged, but everyone essentially, so that mental health care is accessible and affordable to everyone. And
Right.
this is a beautiful way to is sort of also bridge the gap to include all of these different stakeholders, including right from like the NGOs, the grassroots levels, to lawmakers, to policymakers, to future lawyers like you, who can help us make these policies, um, structure them in a beautiful way, and that is really helpful for us when we want to make our own mental
Yeah.
health policy. This is going to be really helpful to understand how we can make it more accessible, more user friendly, essentially, and have language also that's very inclusive.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. And just another point that I would like to add. So I think most of us do not even know about the Mental Health Care Act, right? And I think youth leaders can actually help the community in understanding, how you can access it, right? And how it can be changed. So they can be the link between the people who are actually making use of the law and the ones who are framing it. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So that's a beautiful bridge again to kind of make it more accessible to everyone. We do have one question, but we are unfortunately out of time. We will address the question possibly in the panel session tomorrow. Thank you so much, all my wonderful panelists, for such a beautiful discussion. This was amazing to learn. It was so invaluable to learn all of your experiences, all of your um, personal as well as professional experiences, and all of the pointers that you gave in terms of what the real challenges are, what the real hurdles are for everybody across. And I think we've talked quite a lot about this. We still have so much to talk about, and I wish we had more time, but yes, we have to start wrapping up. So thank you so much for joining in, everyone. Thank you so much, attendees, for being such a wonderful audience. And there is a feedback form that is sent to you on the chat. There is a question form and a feedback form. Please do fill it out. If you have any questions, we will make sure to address them. Thank you so much, Aiti, Shagufta, Arya, Anjur, Himani, for joining in. And we'd love to have you soon sometime again for this. Thank you.